Okej, hej alla, välkomna till Digigräv. Hi everybody, welcome to Digigräv. This session is in English as you probably already know. My name is Emma Johansson and I'm very pleased to welcome Laura Garcia, straight from the UK this morning. She's a multimedia journalist specialized in teaching people how to spot disinformation. And she works for the non-profit organization First Draft, where she heads the training and education across newsrooms and journalism schools. Today she's here to teach us about TikTok. I'm sure everyone has heard of this social media, but what sort of useful information is there for a journalist? Before we start, two quick things. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, which you'll find at the toolbar in the bottom of the screen. And I will address them at the end of the session. And you can all see everyone's questions. And if you like a question, you can press like, and then you will raise up the question to the top. And if you have any technical issues, please write in the chat, and the technical host will try to help you. Okay, Laura, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for having me here to talk about my new favorite thing, which is TikTok. I'm going to tell you a little bit about kind of like my journey into TikTok, my work, and how I've started to use it as a journalist and how we can maybe start to figure this out together. Before I do that, let me just give you a little bit of background of what we do at First Draft. Like Emma said, we're a non-for-profit. We've got offices in London, and well, not that anyone's going into offices anymore, but we have bases in London and New York and in Melbourne in Australia. And the kind of work that we do is about empowering communities to be ready to face potentially harmful information in the moments that matter. So elections, global health pandemics, and that's not just journalists, but NGOs and community organizers and schools and students. And it's my job to be doing this kind of outreach work all the time, meeting amazing people like yourselves to kind of figure out how do we fight this stuff together. And I'm going to walk you through a bunch of practical things. And if you haven't spent some time on the app, I would recommend that you follow along with me. So if you switch your phone to camera mode, just like if you were going to take a picture and point it at the QR code that's on the screen right now, it'll take you to the website that'll let you download the app TikTok. Now, if someone's feeling a little bit resistant because of the different security measures and concerns around TikTok, don't worry, you don't need an account on TikTok just to see the content. But part of the experience of the app and how you can save and monitor things on it is kind of hard to understand until you're doing it. It's kind of like riding a bike. Until you ride the bike, it's a little bit like abstract. So if you want to follow along with me, please come along. Or if you already have the app but you pretend like it's not there and you try and like ignore it, please open it up and play along with me when I do the demonstration and stuff like that. So let's talk about some basics. I got into TikTok because of this particular video. I'm a cat lover. My cat may or may not at one point jump across and kind of interrupt this session because that's what she likes to do. And this video kind of got me wondering, what is this TikTok thing? Oh, hold on a second, because I just didn't press the button properly. Mr. Sandman. But I didn't find this video on TikTok. I saw it on my Instagram feed, on my Twitter feed, but you can see that on the lower, either right-hand side or top left-hand side, it has the TikTok icon with a little music note that moves and what looks like a Twitter handle, right? And I went, what is this TikTok thing? And this must have been about a year ago. And then I just started looking into it and researching it and trying to figure out what makes it different to other social media platforms and what does that mean for us as journalists, right? And one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that TikTok's power to spread beyond its platform is huge. Not just because the app is built to be really shareable. So the moment you make a video on TikTok, it's super easy to send it by WhatsApp, on Instagram, on Twitter, to text message it to someone, to email it, to put it on Snapchat, everywhere you want to go. It's meant to spread, but also because it has its own ecosystem of things around it. So for example, there's playlists on Spotify of top TikTok songs, depending on which country, or there's compilations of funny TikTok videos on YouTube. There's all these little spin-off ecosystems that have grown out of it because of how easy it is to share content from the app. I'm sure you will have seen stuff when you're scrolling on Twitter or on Facebook and then suddenly realize, oh, actually that video has the little TikTok icon. And that's kind of like difference number one. The ability of the app, of how it's built and how people have decided to interact with it, means that its reach is well beyond the app. So even if you don't want to be on the app, it's important to understand it because the content ends up in other places, right? And if you were thinking, oh my God, it's fine, I don't need to learn TikTok because they're totally going to ban it in the States and then they're going to ban it in other countries. These are all other apps that build on the same kind of visual language that TikTok is utilizing, which is vertical frame by frame storytelling with AR functions and songs that are already out there that are growing in popularity. So if TikTok dies, there's already all these replacements ready to take its place. Reels is the Instagram, Facebook version of it. It launched 2 days in India after India banned the app TikTok. And it's humongous there because it kind of took that opportunity. Dubsmash is a lot more for dancers, but has a lot of the same filters and functionalities that I'm going to show you. Fuminate is the same. Likey is humongous in India. Triller is set to be kind of like the successor to TikTok if TikTok doesn't do well. And the last one is a really interesting one called Quibi. So Quibi wants to be kind of like the Netflix of vertical video. It's a membership subscription service. So you pay something like the equivalent of $4 a month and you get access to all their content. But the difference of video on Quibi is that it's short, like less than 10-minute episodes, but they're all shot on vertical video, right? And I'm an old school, like my beginnings in journalism were as a photographer. I am in love with horizontal 16:9 framing, but all of these are shot to be watched in vertical and or horizontal. So you're thinking of how people watch video, documentaries, fiction, they're commissioning news content just straight on their phones. So that's why it's important that we understand the language that TikTok is building around it. So if it sticks around, excellent, we understand it. And if not, we understand their successors, right? And just to prove my point, this is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is one of the, she's a US House candidate in the state. She's a Democrat. All of the Democrats and Republicans in the United States are forbidden from having TikTok on their phone because of security concerns with China. But what she's done is that she's taken Instagram stories and that functionality to emulate a TikTok. So she basically tried to replicate the storytelling and the language on a different app, and just to kind of show the power of how this narrative style and structure spreads beyond, right? And I did try to go into Swedish TikTok and find a couple of examples to show you guys, but if I'm honest, I couldn't really find much because of how the algorithm works, and I'll explain that in a second. So all of my examples are going to be from kind of very US, UK centric / Mexican, because that's where I'm from, TikTok. But I'm sure you guys will find your own the moment that you start to get on the app. So who is on TikTok? You have your normal kind of big celebrities, so like the Jane Fonda, Elton Johns of the world, and Snoop Dogg. But the biggest TikTok star in the entire world is the 16-year-old girl called Charli D'Amelio, who has 87 million followers. And all she does, if you go to her account, is do little kind of like dances and dance challenges with her friends, and has a humongous audience. Now, recently, Charli D'Amelio has signed a contract to also be on Triller, which is the competitor app to TikTok, but she doesn't have an exclusivity contract. So she might be kind of posting at the same time on TikTok, on Triller, keeping up her Instagram and her YouTube account and getting sponsorship from all of these places, right? Which is an important part to remember. TikTok has thrived because it's a business. It has and it fosters content creators and influencers that get sponsored, that get sponsored because of their reach and their views, that can do partnerships and corporate branding opportunities and all that kind of stuff. And to speak to that business of TikTok, there's the concept of hype houses. And I don't know if you guys have heard these before, but a hype house is basically a collective of creators that get together. And when I say get together, I mean they physically live together so that they can make more content together, help each other out, feature in each other's videos, and kind of become a collective that way. Think of it like a TikTok commune almost, where people are working together to produce content. And this isn't anything new. We've seen it before when like writers moved to Paris to live together so they could write with each other, or YouTube content creator houses where people did exactly the same thing. The iteration for TikTok is called a hype house. And the two biggest ones is the Hype House, which is a group of American kids, And I say kids because they're all kids, they're all teenagers who live in California together. Byte Squad is the British version, and there's many others, right? But these are the two biggest ones. But just like there are hype houses, there's also political hype houses. So for example, this is particularly in the United States, you have the leftist hype house, the Marxians hype house, the Republican hype house. And again, speaking to how communities find each other and then start to create content and collaborate together. And I'm sure you will find cultural equivalents to the things that speak to Sweden and the Swedish communities. But there's a ton of other kinds of people on TikTok: lawyers, doctors, gynecologists, law professors, artists, and people who have realized that the way the app works means that they don't need a huge following to find a huge audience. And I'll explain that in a second when I walk you through how the For You page works and why that is super relevant for journalism. And TikTok's particular spread, and I'm going to say this is mostly in the States and in the UK, that doesn't translate for necessarily for other parts of the world, got really exponentiated by the pandemic, by the fact that suddenly we were all at home and staring at our phones and trying to figure out what to do. Lots of people who are also creative but out of work that had to find an outlet for telling their stories and talking about their work, and they found it on TikTok. But you can also find lots of communities of faith on TikTok, or different cultures. For example, Amish teens are using TikTok to show people their life. I saw a bunch of my friends who are Muslim using TikTok to share their stories of Ramadan and celebrating because they couldn't be together in person because of the pandemic. The account on the right is one of my favorite ones. They're a collective of priests. I forget if they're from Argentina or from Spain, but they do these really funny TikTok videos with each other to try and kind of reach younger people and bring them into the church and all that kind of stuff. And just like it's a place for communities, culture, and creativity, because there's information, it can also be a place for disinformation, right? And journalism is about people. So we kind of have to be able to go where our communities are spending time to find them, to tell their stories, and also to speak to them in a language that they understand. The GIF on the right, for example, is a collection of hashtags the day after George Floyd was killed in the United States. And just look at the amount of hashtags and the content and how people were turning to TikTok to show their rage, their anger, their feelings, their support. And if you'll notice, the hashtags can also include emojis, which is a huge difference between TikTok and other apps. So for example, you can have George Floyd with a heart, George Floyd with a little hands in prayer, George Floyd with 2 hearts, and those are 3 separate hashtags to monitor. And I'll walk through what we can monitor in a second. So how the app works. Let's see if I can make my phone hook up to the screen. While I'm doing that, Emma, are there any kind of like urgent super questions in the chat that we should have a look at in the meantime? Come on, phone, you can do this. Right. You guys should be able to see my phone. This is scary when I when I hook up my phone to Zoom. So the biggest difference when you open the app is that this landing page is called the For You page. You can see it at the top on the right hand side. It's highlighted kind of like in bold. There's 2 sections: For You and Following. Following is kind of like Twitter and Instagram. If I switch over to that, it shows me the content of the accounts that I follow, right? Specifically of the accounts that I follow. But the landing page of the app is the For You page. And this is the power and the beauty and the danger of TikTok all rolled together. The For You page uses an algorithm that learns from what you watch, how many times you watch it, did you share it, did you like it, did you download the video, and what content you create. And it takes all of those things together and then gives you what you think you want to see on that landing page. So if you're on TikTok, for example, you can go and try and search for carpentry, watch 10 videos of carpentry back to back, like a couple of them, and you will immediately see that reflected in your For You page. The algorithm changes really, really, really quickly to what it thinks you want. And that is amazing from entertaining purposes. So for example, I have 2 TikTok accounts, the one that I use for my personal, just viewing fun videos, and the one that I use for work, because I saw that I couldn't do both at the same time. If I started looking for journalism content or disinformation on TikTok, it completely changed the algorithm on my For You page really quickly, and it would kind of ruin my viewing experience of what the app is like, right? So that is an important thing to think about, because it means that, for example, someone with very little followers can have humongous exposure if the video they've created strikes a chord with the algorithm, and the algorithm goes, oh, actually, I think a bunch of people are going to like this, and then shows it to a bunch of people. I don't think it's the case with this particular lady that we're seeing on the screen, but let's have a look. So for example, this video has 61, almost 62,000 likes, 1,000 and a bit comments, 4,000 shares, and you can see it. So if we go down, let's look at the anatomy of the TikTok video. So the little circle on the left-hand side with a red plus, that is her account. And if you click it, because it has the plus, it's automatically going to make you follow her, which might not be what you want, right? But you have that choice. The next one further down is you like it. The little chat looking like thing is so you can comment on the video. The arrow lets you share it, and look at how many options it's giving me. Oh, you guys can see that because it's a second layer of video on the phone. But basically, if you guys try it on your phone, it gives you tons of options. If I open it now, what I am seeing is copy link, message on TikTok, because TikTok also has like a DM function, send it by text, Facebook, Twitter, email, Likey, all sorts of other platforms. The little disc on the lower right-hand side, you know, that what looks like a long play disc, that is the song that she's using. And then you can see, if we move to the left-hand side, her handle is there, so it's @thechinyata, and then underneath it is the name of the song that she's using. So if I wanted to check, for example, her profile, I can click on the left-hand side where it says @chinyata, where you can see her handle, and it takes me straight to her account. And I have a feeling my phone thing has... Oh, there we go. We're back. So if we go to her account, you can see then how many followers she's got, who she's following, the combined likes of her account. That you can see that she's also got her her Instagram, and you can follow her, and she's got her website linked. And if see the little arrow on the right hand side pointing down, if you click that, it gives you related accounts or suggested accounts, and that's a good way if you're trying to find more accounts to follow that speak to a specific community. That's a good way to find them. And if you scroll down her profile, you can see that some of her videos are really successful, but some of them aren't, right? So the one that we were looking at before is the second row, third column to the right, that has 451, almost 452,000 likes or views or plays, right? That's what the little play button means. But look at the one at the far left in that same row, that doesn't even have 8,000. And that speaks to how the algorithm kind of puts this content in front of people, right? And it's completely unrelated to how many followers she has. So I've found accounts before, for example, that have 300 followers, but one of the videos has got like 600,000 views. And that's because the content of the video spoke to the algorithm, spoke to people's preferences, and then showed it to more and more and more and more and more people. And that is a really powerful tool for content creators, because they know that all they have to do is try and try and try until they hit something that works. But it's also really dangerous potentially for disinformation, right? Because an account with very little followers can have humongous exposure. Whereas in somewhere like Twitter, for example, nobody except my followers are going to see what I tweet. So you have to purposely follow that person. And that's an important difference to keep in mind. Now, if you look at the bottom options on the bottom of your screen, so you have home, discover, the plus sign, inbox, and me. So me takes me to my profile. And if anyone wants to follow me on TikTok, that's my handle. And you can see the videos that I've had. And the little next on the right towards this edit profile is my bookmark section. And this is the power of monitoring TikTok for journalists. In the bookmarks, I can save videos. So if I see a video that's interesting that I want to keep in my bank, I can bookmark it. I can bookmark hashtag searches so that I can then go back and revisit them. And remember that hashtags can include emojis as well. I can bookmark sounds, because sounds is an extra layer of storytelling that TikTok has that that Twitter and Instagram don't, where the sound itself can be a trend. And I can also bookmark effects, because the effect that people use can also become a part of how they're how they're talking to each other or a specific story. So for example, I saw it in the Mexican, it wasn't a presidential election. We had elections last year for like state and municipalities, and people who supported a particular party wouldn't necessarily write in the description that they supported that party, but they would use a specific sound, a song, or they would use the specific effect and a trend. And that was how people would communicate. And unless you knew that about how people use this app, you wouldn't be able to monitor these kind of conversations that are happening on TikTok, right? Where the cultural and the political overlap, because politics is cultural. So one last thing that I'm going to show you here real quick, and then we'll go do a bit of investigation. So if I'm anywhere on TikTok, for example here, if I want to save this video, I go to the share button and then add to favorites. Can you guys see that option there? Oh, and now you can see all the places where I can send it. And you can save it, which is amazing. And now it's in your bank of stuff. If I wanted to look at other videos using this same song, I can click on the little LP record and it takes me to other videos using that exact same track. And again, think about how trends develop, right? And you will always find, if it's an original song or something that someone created rather than music that's licensed through TikTok, eventually you'll be able to find the video that says original with a little kind of red bar. So then on this case, for example, is the one on the left. Can you guys see it? It says original. So that was the first video to use this sound. And then other people can repurpose it and use it. If I wanted to use this sound to make my own video, see at the bottom where it has a little pulsating button that says use this sound. And now it opens up the creator part of TikTok. And rather than have you see my face, let me point it this way. So that's my bed, sorry. And you have all these different options. And if anyone's into kind of new creative ways of storytelling, it's worth spending some time on TikTok because there's so many kind of options of what you can do. And that's the power of TikTok. It's kind of like a video editing software, an AR filter creation system, and After Effects all rolled in one. And you can upload your own photos. You can do 60-second videos or 15-second videos. It has a very, very, very wide effects bank. So for example, if I, let's do that and turn the camera around. It has AR filters just like Snapchat. And again, these can be used really effectively for journalism. For example, if you wanted people to send you their anonymous experiences of sexual harassment, but you wanted to use their own face and their own voice in a way, but in a way that protects their anonymity, you can do stuff like this. You can use the green screen function really effectively to speak in front of pictures. So put yourself in front of pictures. Hold on a second. I don't think I did it right. There you go. So I pick an image and I can put myself in front of it and speak to what's on it. And I have seen this, and I'll show you an example of how this particular function has been used really effectively to debunk fake news, right? So we can learn the language and the storytelling language of TikTok and use it to tell the stories and debunk the information that we find there. So let me run you really quickly through how I think this matters for disinformation and why the power of the app, now that you've seen it a little bit, is so important. So it builds on the language that we already saw coming from Vine. If you guys remember Vine, looped GIFs, Instagram stories, and the AR and VR functionalities of Snapchat. And I found this phrase by Josh Constantine, who's the used to be the digital editor at TechCrunch, where he makes a distinction between micro entertainment and social media, and how one carries more power than the other, and how we need to start to think about TikTok as micro entertainment rather than social. Granted, some people do use it to talk about their lives and their experiences, but the format is almost like mini comic books, right? They tell a little story. And that speaks to the content density of the stuff that we find on TikTok. It's the entertainment value of a piece of content divided by its length, more or less kind of like how many oohs and ahs or emotions we get to feel per second. The longest a TikTok video can be is 60 seconds, but you can squeeze quite a lot in there. And I'll show you an example. And it's by using all of these different functions that we just saw in the app. The images that you upload, tags, the music and the sound trend, the hashtags that you use, the description that you can write, the effects that you can use that become part of a trend. And then there's two other options of how you can interact with other people's videos. You can do a stitch, which means that it lets you grab 10 or 5 seconds from someone else's videos and remix it into your own. And you can do that straight on the app. You don't need to download and edit elsewhere. And you can also duet someone's video where they become, you can see yours and theirs side by side where you can react to each other. So for example, this is one layer of storytelling. Well, all you need to understand this video is get the song reference. Oh, hold on a second. I didn't click on it properly again. And that's silly, right? But it speaks to culture and pop music and all that kind of stuff. But then sometimes those references, that kind of layer of memification can be a little bit more sophisticated and a little bit more technological, right? So that's the sound of when you get an error on Microsoft Windows that maybe some of the younger people in the audience might not remember, but some of us really do. And then you can start to layer them up, right? So this particular video, for example, has a musical reference. It references a film or a story, and then it also has an effect trend. So I don't know if you could hear that, but it's like the spinning wheel in Maleficent, which is the spin-off film to Sleeping Beauty. And the whole point is that you're trying to get Sleeping Beauty to prick her finger on the thing so she falls asleep forever. And it's also using the music from Cats, right? I'm well aware we're starting to run out of time, Emma. Don't worry, I'm getting there. And I'll show you just how effective this can be used for storytelling and how these trends can evolve from something seemingly really inane to actually having lots of layers of interesting things that we can unpick. So this is a trend on TikTok. The song is the trend, and the action is the trend. So people, when they jump, they do the transition with their clothes. And it's mostly an excuse for like good-looking people to dress up like what they would look like if they were in a TV show, right? But the trend is all of those things together. The song, the action, the transition, the dressing up. So then add a layer of cultural kind of understanding, right? Someone has a pet frog and decided to do the same for their frog. Song is the same, transition, but this is building on visual language, right? These different photos all speak to what different magazines look like. Let's take it up one notch and add a layer of social commentary to that. Same trend, same song. So what these kids are trying to say is that there are absolutely no characters with Asian backgrounds in any of these TV shows, right? But they're using the same trend, they're using the same song, and they're using the same language to build on it. And we can do that incredibly effectively for storytelling ourselves and also to look out for content. One of the best examples of how to do journalism on TikTok is the Washington Post. They hired this guy called Dave Jorgensen, who's like 29, gave him a phone and went, "We don't understand this TikTok thing, figure it out." And just gave him free reign to try new stuff. And he has become really effective at storytelling. This is one of my favorite TikToks from him.
When I see you again, we've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again. Damn, who knows?
So he's using a song to speak to the history of what is actually a really traditional legacy newspaper in the States, right? The Washington Post aren't super hip and trendy, except for their amazing TikTok account that they've got that is helping them find new audiences. Really quickly, why do we need to monitor TikTok? Just like memes that we share with each other carry information, they also carry potentially dangerous disinformation. From, for example, these two I got from different family WhatsApps that I'm in. The one on the left, that's meant to be funny, all these like Heineken beers curling back from a Corona beer, but in reality, the sales of Corona beer went down like 30% at the beginning of the pandemic because people did make that association. Or the one on the right-hand side, which carries obviously kind of xenophobic undertones and anti-Asian sentiment. TikToks are essentially memes, micro entertainment, micro stories with incredible power to convey both information in a lovely positive way, but also disinformation. And even though TikTok banned political advertising completely last year, it doesn't mean that there isn't political content on TikTok, right? That intersection of culture and politics is very, very alive on there. And I'll play you really quickly a little bit of this video. This is a song trend on TikTok. So this girl didn't originally compose this song. It's a song that someone created on TikTok and now is encouraging people to use that sound, to remix it, doing their own makeup tutorials to amplify the story and the voice, trying to highlight what's happening in China with the Uyghur Muslims, right? So again, this intersection of culture and politics. And we've seen loads of coronavirus stuff that TikTok has had to take down because it's broken their rules. And even when stuff comes out, I don't know if you guys heard of the Plandemic documentary that came out earlier in the year that had a lot of falsehoods and misleading information about coronavirus. Once it gets deplatformed from somewhere, so it got taken down from Facebook and YouTube, a lot of it ended up on TikTok. And maybe not necessarily in the same way. People didn't edit bits of Plandemic, but what they would do is film their screens while they were watching it. So the content still travels and the content is still there, right? And sometimes not understanding the platform can lead journalists to be the source of disinformation. This account on the left is POC Republicans, People of Color for Trump. And it's a bunch of teenagers who are actually doing it as satire. They're all people of color, and they post these TikTok videos making fun of Republicans because they don't think they represent them. And someone who doesn't understand the nature of the platform, who doesn't understand how satire works on TikTok, reported them as like, oh my God, these teenagers, these people of color teenagers love Trump and they're super hardcore Republicans because they missed the joke, right? So if we don't understand the language of the platform, we can also become the source of disinformation because we will misreport what is going on there. And just two last examples, and then we'll take your questions. So this is an example of someone using the green screen function that I was just showing you to fact check stories in India. So obviously I can't understand this, and maybe some of you guys can, but just to show you how someone can use this as a powerful storytelling tool. So he's pointing to different stories in a newspaper and explaining their relationship, how did they work, and it's a really short little video that kind of conveys that information quickly. And this one on the oh, hold on a second. And this one on the right is now how there's all the fires in California. A firefighter used the duet function to kind of fact check a conspiracy theory video. So this lady here is the original video, and she's saying like it's really strange that all of these fires are happening and saying all these conspiracy theory things. And he didn't have to do any editing outside the app. He used the duet function to react to what she's saying, to add context.
Because it's a US database map you're looking at. Not going to be reporting Canada fires.
Look at all the stuff we have. Not to mention,
look up Canada though.
Zero story is.
And how we can use these really powerfully, right? So one, I see you, Emma. I really do. Sorry. So things that we can monitor on TikTok to keep on top of: users' accounts, the hashtags that can have emojis, trends and visual effects, and keep an eye out because sometimes that is an important way that people communicate this stuff, particularly when the apps start to pick up hashtags that are problematic and immediately take down content. People are really creative and they find ways to skirt content moderation, and sometimes they use it by not using any hashtags but using a specific trend or effect that speaks to that, right? And then the music and the sound. And really quickly, if you wanted to do some sort of like basic investigations, TikTok, if you want to see someone's profile on a desktop, you have to include the @ before the handle, which is weird, right? Because in Twitter you wouldn't have to. So if you want to see someone's profile on desktop, you have to include the @. If you wanted to find content on TikTok using Google search operators, what you can do is write site:/tiktok.com. So you're asking Google search within tiktok.com and then use any kind of words that you're looking for. In this case, I used the example of The Rock, who's an actor in the States because I'm a really big fan. And if you wanted to find content like videos from TikTok that have gone other places in the internet, you can do this variation. So the Rock or whatever it is that you're looking for minus site tiktok.com. And the important thing here is that your first two are the words of what you're looking for. This and using in the Boolean search operator and tiktok.com means that it's going to be looking for the URL. So something of TikTok video that made its way to Instagram or to Facebook or to a new site, right? But it's going to be looking for it outside of TikTok. And that is the important part. So you can see how that spread happens really, really, really quickly. I'm just going to fast forward to give you a couple of, well, actually, no, let's go to questions and then I'll show some of the resources that I've got at the end.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks. We have a question here and I'll read it to you. How do you get a macro view of what is trending on TikTok in a specific country, such as Sweden, since everyone has their own page own For You page, what's the best way to get an overview?
Okay, really good question. And why it makes it really hard to monitor stuff on TikTok outside of your country. The app takes the location of your phone, so where physically your phone is, and caters the content for that. On the app, there is a part that says Discover. Actually, I'll show you really quickly. Hold on a second. Let's do it. The Discover page is kind of like the trending page on Twitter, but again, it's going to be specifically catered to wherever in the world your phone is, and there's no way to trick it with like VPNs or anything like that, because it takes it from the hardware of your phone. There isn't the equivalent of Google Trends. We are one of several organizations pushing really hard for TikTok to create some sort of dashboard where we can look at what's trending in different countries. So if you go on the app here again, stop it. Discover at the bottom. If you click the Discover button, this landing page is your kind of like equivalent of Twitter trends. The ones that I'm seeing are going to be really different to what you see, because these ones is showing me stuff in the UK, because my phone is in the UK. Yours will show you stuff for Sweden. But then it'll show you, for example, the songs that are trending, the hashtags that are trending, the effects that are trending sometimes, and you can explore them this way. And at the top, it also has kind of like sponsored content, what TikTok wants to show you. For example, there's the Rosh Hashanah, I think, because it's that celebration is happening now. Sometimes it's educational content, sometimes it's sponsored content. So for example, fashion brands are starting to really invest in TikTok and use the power of content creators and influencers. I've also, at the beginning of the pandemic, TikTok featured the World Health Organization really highly in all of their searches, trying to kind of surface good content around the pandemic. But you can see all of these and their engagement on the right-hand side. For example, this hashtag, Walk You're Wonderful, has 1.3 billion something layers of engagement. Some of these stats aren't particularly clear, and that's one of the things that we're trying to fight to get TikTok to give us more clarity on. But you can then go and see all of the things, the official sponsored content at the top, and then what other videos people have created following that trend. So that's one way to see it, but it's really hard to see what's trending in other countries. I try my hardest with this is my journalist account, to on purpose go and follow accounts about Mexico, Mexican politics, Mexican culture, to try and force the algorithm to show me that kind of content. But there's no easy way to see what's trending in other content. That was a really long-winded answer for your question, but there you go. We saw a little bit more of TikTok.
Yeah, we have 2 more questions.
Oh, sorry, there we go. Speaking of.
2 more questions. Should we take them as well?
Yes, please.
Yes. The first is, has there been any big news stories that started as disinformation spread on TikTok? Is it a common platform for spreading disinformation?
Oh, that's a really good question. I haven't seen any stories where TikTok is the source, the unique news source. I've seen it a lot as a place where stuff that was problematic already finds a new home on TikTok, and they use the algorithm to spread things quicker. But I haven't seen any place where the conspiracy, for example, starts on TikTok, or the potentially problematic information starts on TikTok. It was already living probably somewhere like Reddit or 4chan or 8kun or whatever, and then eventually finds a new home on TikTok and uses the algorithm to get in front of more people. What I have seen is a bunch of journalists who start to use TikTok as user-generated content, first-hand witness video. So for example, there were floods back home in Mexico like a month and a half ago, and we always turn to the app that is more intimate and more natural to us. And at some point that was Twitter, at some point that was Instagram or Facebook, and now it's TikTok. So a bunch of the user-generated content of people just filming what was happening around them and showing their houses being flooded was on TikTok, and people having to go there to get that kind of witness material and video and take it from TikTok, not from Twitter and not from Instagram.
Yeah. Now you have your phone here. It's on screen. Maybe you want to take it out. Yeah. Okay. And last question. Then I know you have some a manual for some more research tips on your website. So maybe you can mention it at the end. But just this question first. How can the platform be used for data mining? The content is very messy and it's very image based. It's talk about how Chinese government can use it. Any idea how?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so there's 2 parts to that question. As journalists, we can do data journalism on TikTok. but you need to know coding for that. So for example, some of my colleagues at First Draft have developed a Python scrapper that lets you download the information of, I don't know, 10,000 TikToks all at the same time, and the code for the music they're using and the code for the hashtags that they're using. So you can do some more like complicated data analysis kind of stuff. That is part one. When it comes to security, the concern is that the app, much like Facebook, much like Instagram, right, learns from what you're doing and has access to certain parts of your phone. And that's the part of data mining that people are worried in. If I'm honest, the conversation, and I think I have a slide that I'm going to find because someone said it way better than I'm going to be able to explain about where the intersection of all of these concerns around TikTok should lie. And this comes from Alex Stamos. He works at the Stanford Internet Observatory. Let me show it to you guys really quickly. And it's about how there are legitimate concerns about TikTok, the app, but some of them aren't any different of what we should have of other applications. And this is particularly to the States, but kind of fits to everywhere. So for example, TikTok and other apps that are owned by Chinese companies can be influenced by the Chinese government at any point in time. That is true. The US and other countries need stronger federal data protection frameworks that can protect the people using this. That is 100% racist to conflate the actions of the Chinese government with Chinese people. That trying to flout free speech versus security concerns can be really problematic. And that intersection and all of those things can be true, right? And we can live in that intersection. And you give way more of your information to Facebook and Google while you search online that you do to TikTok. The problem is that the way Chinese companies or companies that are domiciled in China have to work is that sometimes they do have to respond to the government in a way that we wouldn't expect them to in other countries, right? And that is the main worry. And even though TikTok had split itself in two, so you have Douyin, which is the Chinese-based part, and TikTok, which is domiciled in the States and services the rest of the world, the algorithm, for example, which is so powerful, is still owned by Douyin, which is the Chinese part of the company. And where does those, it's like a really bad divorce. Where does those two things get separated, and how do you get a clear line of both surveillance and authority? And all of those concerns are kind of legitimate, but also really inflated by politics in the States. So I would say in terms of the app and the information that the app can get from you is nothing out of the ordinary than the information that we already give a ton of other apps. It just has that extra layer of kind of politics added to it.
Okay, thank you. We have just 2 or 3 minutes left. So maybe first I want to thank you for this. It's very interesting. And perhaps you can just give us some clue where to go if we want to find more information. For example, if we want to do some, exactly, thank you.
Definitely. So I'll leave you with some stuff. So number one, Francesco Ceferano, who is the social media editor at the Daily Telegraph in the UK, has a crowdsourced live Google spreadsheet of journalists and media outlets on TikTok. So far on his list, there's no one on Sweden on there because I checked. That doesn't mean that there aren't any journalists in Sweden doing journalism on TikTok or any media outlets. It just means that because this Google sheet is crowdsourced, no one has input them in. So you guys can help us make this list better by finding people who you know that are working on this platform and adding them to this list. This is completely public and open to anybody to add to it. You have to submit like a little form, and then Francesco checks that you're actually submitting real things, that it's not spam, and then adds them to the spreadsheet so that we can all build our understanding together of how other people are using this. There's really interesting examples of politicians starting to use TikTok. I've been finding a bunch of German politicians on TikTok. Oh, I forget the name of the French guy. I found he's like a cabinet minister, really old school French politician, and he has a TikTok account starting to play with it. So it's again, where our audiences go, we have to go, right? So a list by Francesco, highly recommend as a place to look. There's 2 new newsletters about TikTok that I really recommend because they kind of break down new features and cultural storytelling trends. The one on the left is by a German journalist called Markus Bosch, and he does an amazing job of trying to do both. So telling you any new features that he finds, plus the biggest narratives that have come across TikTok. And he uses Twitter to crowdsource the stories. So his newsletter includes stories from all over the world. And then the other one is by a guy called Kerem Inlan, which is a little bit more US focused. What were you going to say, Emma?
Sorry. I'm sorry, we really need to end this now. Perhaps if you have any additional information, we'll put it in our on our DigiGrev site, and people can go there to have a look. Okay.
Definitely. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you very
having me,
much.
guys. Those are my details. Get in touch.
Thank you very much. Okay. Bye bye.